Good evening. Yes, yes. The time is now to go forward together. Forward together. Forward together. Forward together. Yes, I just love the enthusiasm in the room. This is what's going to carry us through the next 40 days and beyond. This is what's going to change the heart and soul of our democracy. Forward together. Forward together. Welcome to the Poor People's Campaign, a national call to moral revival. The time is now for us to go forward together. If ever there was a need for moral revival, there is a need today. In a time where one of the wealthiest nations in the world is third in the list of nations suffering from child poverty, we need a moral revival. A time when women and children make up the majority of those suffering through homelessness and hunger, we need a moral revival. A time when there are more Black Americans incarcerated than there were Africans enslaved centuries ago, we need a moral revival. We are living through wars that exploit the poor and support the top 1%. The list of injustices existing in this country far exceeds what can be named in one sitting, and that is why we need a moral revival. Since its inception, this nation has never stood in the light of moral fortitude. It is and has always been the voice and the fight of people who have decided that what is right for humanity is not contingent upon what makes a dollar for the already wealthy. Those who have decided that what is right must be won by struggle. Those who have decided to put their bodies on the line. We are here because we recognize that everybody's got a right to a livable earning. Everybody's got a right to clean water. Everybody's got a right to fair education, a right to vote, a right to housing and life-saving health care, a right to live. To the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Forward together. Forward together. Welcome.
Good evening. We thank Reverend Jasmine Brooks, member of the DC Coordinating Committee, for our awesome opening. My name is Reverend Terrence Mayer, one of the co-chairs for the DMV Poor People's Campaign, and we welcome you here tonight to hear from prolific speakers, those testifying, speaking about their lived experiences in our communities, and also including in that will be wonderful compilations of music and arts from our theomusicology. So next we will have up, coming to give welcome here, Reverend Dr. Stephen Gentle and Reverend Terry Hord Owens will bring welcome on behalf of the General Minister and President of the Christian Church. And after that, we will have our arts department, where we're bringing a performance after that.
Good evening. Welcome. We are so honored that you are here tonight. My name is Stephen Gentle. I'm the senior pastor of National City Christian Church. And 10 days ago when we got the call, would you? We said, yes, we would. And we are so glad. We are so honored that you are here and so delighted to be a part of the Poor People's Campaign. 165 years ago, our leaders envisioned a church here in the capital city whereby we might have a stationed advocate to proclaim good news to the poor, and that we may share the good news of God's love with all people, that we may have a house that's a gathering place for all people. So having you here tonight fulfills our purposes and keeps us in tune with our mission. So welcome to National City Christian Church. We are the National Church of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We are an open and affirming congregation, and it is my honor to welcome to this place tonight our General Minister and President of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the Reverend Teresa Hord Owens.
Welcome, Pastor Gentle. On behalf of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the U.S. and Canada, we are glad that you are here. We as Christians realize that we're not the Christians only, and we are not the only faith tradition. So no matter your tradition, no matter your background, no matter where you come from, you are not only welcome in this place, but the disciples of Christ are standing here in this pivotal moment with our brother, Dr. William Barber, who is one of our own. Amen. With Dr. Liz Theo Harris, with all the brilliant minds, creative and artistic geniuses, energetic young voices that are working all across the country to ensure that our collective voices will be heard, that our collective strength will be felt, and that together we will stand not against the poor, but stand with them to eradicate the scourge and moral stain of poverty from our country. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to following along with you, walking along with you, standing with you as together we work to end poverty in this country. God bless.
We've got this thing down by now. I don't even have to ask right now where the altos, sopranos, tenors, baritones. I don't have to do that because we've been rehearsing that all year long. So you know the drill by now, right? Everybody stands together because we stand together. And we're going to start this in the tradition of mass meeting with some of our traditional movement songs. And I want to hear your voices like never before. If you're sitting way at the back, we want to hear you as if you were up front, which means if you're sitting at the back, you might want to move up front, right? All right, here we go. Woke up this morning with my mind. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. I said I woke up this morning with my mind. Yes, I woke up this morning with my mind. floors, right? These are wood floors. So there is no reason why I shouldn't hear, woke up this morning with my mom. Come on, let's try it. Let me hear the wood, that's it. Woke up this morning with my, you know I woke up this morning with my mind. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah, it ain't no harm to keep your mind. I said it ain't no harm to keep your mind. I said it ain't no harm if you keep your mind. Hallelujah. Yeah. You know I'm walking and talking with my mind. I said I'm walking and talking with my mind. Yes, I'm walking and talking with my mind. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You know it ain't no harm to keep your mind. I said it ain't no harm if you keep your mind. I said it ain't no harm to keep your mind. Hallelujah. All right, here we go. Give me the drums. Yeah, I woke up this morning with my mind. I said I woke up this morning with my mind. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. Yes, I'm singing and praying with my mind. I said I'm singing and praying with my mind. You know I'm singing and praying with my mind. Hallelujah. Yeah, I'm walking, talking with my mind. And then I'm singing, praying with my mind. And you know I'm texting and tweeting with my mind. Hallelujah. Yeah. I woke up this morning with my mind. I said I woke up this morning with my mind. You know I woke up this morning with my mind. Hallelujah. Here you go. Hallelujah. Yeah. Somebody sound like they woke up with their mind stayed on freedom. You got me convinced. And so if your mind is stayed on freedom, you don't have a problem letting your light shine, right? You don't have a problem. Nobody has to look for the light. It's already there. All right, so let's do this one. Let's do this little light of mine. Give it up for the band. Are they good? I have a confession, y'all pray for me, I steal bands. I'm in a church. All right, here we go. How do you like that rhythm section? Sound all right? Y'all convinced about that rhythm section? Give it up for the singers. And these are some of the lead musicologists from the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. So you'll be seeing a lot of them. All right, here's the last one. Let's make it good. This little light of mine. Oh, this little light of mine. This little light. I don't have to do anything on this one. Yeah, all around the world, y'all. I said all around the world, y'all. All around the world. Yeah, in this campaign, y'all. Oh, I said in this campaign. You know, in this campaign, y'all. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Yeah, I'm standing for my rights and then I'm standing for your rights and oh, I'm standing for your rights and let it shine. Now look at somebody and tell them, I'm fighting for you and oh, I'm fighting for you and oh, yes I am. Let it shine. Can we do it without the music? Here we go. Yeah, this little light of mine. Oh, this little light of mine. I said this little light of mine. Let it shine. Yeah. Come on, one more time. Oh, this little light of mine. I said this little light of mine. This little light of mine. Let it shine. This is the last time. Oh, I said this little light of mine. I said this little light of mine. This little light of mine. Let it, let it.
All right, just before we sit down, don't sit down yet. All right, all the folk that are trying to manage the time, put your stuff down. Because you're in a mass meeting and you're getting ready to mess up the Holy Ghost. Put it down, Norm. Just throw it up under the seat. All right, now, the sound man said that this mic was going out. Well, if it's going out, send me another one. We need folk to act, because in a movement, you have to adjust to the moment. In a movement, you don't just go through the program and just keep going if something not right, because we're trying to get stuff right. And if you're not willing to disrupt in here, you ain't willing to disrupt on Capitol Hill. And whenever you're doing something with poor people and impact, you make sure poor people get the best so that they can be heard. Because if mean folk got the best sound, then poor folk need the best sound. Right. So, I'm giving folk license, because sometimes we come to stuff and we get so tight, you can't let the Holy Ghost in. You know, this 40 days. Turn to your neighbor and say, 40 days. Are you ready? Say 6 Mondays. Woo! Now, how many of you all are sitting beside somebody you know or you normally hang out with? Just raise your hand. Don't lie. That you normally hang out with. Okay. How many of you are close to somebody you don't necessarily know? You ain't never seen them before. Good. That's what we want the nation to see, people that they ain't never seen before in their life. So if you've never seen them before in your life, go for 5 seconds, have a hugging fest. Give me a little music, give me a little music. Have a hugging fest. Give me a little bit of this little light of mine, just a little bit. Just a little bit of this little light of mine. You have a hugging fest.
Give you a hug. Bless you, sister.
I got testing. Oh, now. Yeah. Okay. Have y'all finished hugging yet? Let me see that. Have y'all finished hugging yet? Have a hugging fest. I'm going to show them something. All right. Now, bring it down just a little bit. Shh. All right. Now, hugging fest. See, because if we can't hug one another in here, how are we going to make Capitol Hill understand they need to be hugging and lifting everybody? Right. See, everybody in here is special. I heard somebody say, we're going to have some prolific speakers. No, we ain't. We're going to have everyday speakers, and what they say is important. Ain't no big eyes, ain't no little U's. Right? Now, one more thing. You see the difference, Mr. Mike? See the difference? See the difference? When you're in a movement, you stop. If it ain't right, you stop. If it ain't right, you stop. If it ain't right, you stop. Because if they don't hear you, you can't change the narrative. And we always got time to get it right. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, the right time to do right is right now. Now, y'all, I want you and Sharon and that'll preach, won't it? Sharon and Cheryl and Tashambe and Shada. And now we need a mic for this crowd. Their mic ain't right either. I'm like my grandmama. I believe in fixing stuff when it's broke. I need a mic over here for my singers. Because the singers got to have the right mic. Come on, mic man. Amen. And always when you're playing, have 4 mics. 2 on the side and 2 just in case. And y'all, I want you to take us back. Maybe you have to do it and they have to holler the best you can. Mahalia Jackson didn't have any mics. Right? So I want y'all to take one more shot at this little light of mine before the rabbi and the imam come. I want y'all to take one more shot. You want this mic, don't you? You want this? Which one you want? This? All right. Give us one more shot.
Come on, y'all. Let's huddle around this mic until they get us. Pull it in close. Slide it over that way, son. Over that way, son. Y'all got it? Come on in. Coming in close. Squeeze it in.
You don't want to say it from the sign language.
This little light of mine. Take it in the middle.
Let it shine.
I said this little light of mine.
I'm gonna let it shine.
Oh, this little light of mine.
I'm gonna let it shine.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Hill, I'm gonna let it shine. I said over on Capitol Hill, I'm gonna let it shine. Over on Capitol Hill, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Feels like the old mass meetings. We're here in all of our diversity. We're here in the human family.
There is a fire raging now for the poor of this society. They are living in tragic conditions because of the terrible economic injustices that keep them locked in.
We have to deal with our war economy and systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation. And finally, we have to deal with the moral narrative.
This wall, this is sin of the highest order.
We are traveling around this country building this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
What we want to do now is hear a little bit from the local community who are a part of this campaign.
I've spent 5 or so more years homeless.
Living on minimum wage has caused me to have to figure out on a daily basis how to afford basic necessities.
While the U.S. sends trillions abroad, my friends, family, and fellow veterans suffer the economic consequences of the war economy.
I have 2 children, and I enjoy raising them while acknowledging that being poor is a struggle of human rights.
But when I lost my housing, healthcare, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
I want to stand here and reclaim the power and dignity of the mujeres in my life.
I can't afford to pay a cab.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
And in the aftermath of climate change disasters, poor people and people of color are the ones to lose their homes.
Who can't survive with $7.25?
No parent should have, in America should have to bury their children for lack of medical attention.
Being poor is not a sin. Poverty is a sin. Being homeless is not a sin. Homelessness is a sin.
And we are here, and it's time for us to be the remnant that can transform the nation.
We are calling for a season of moral resistance, a season of organizing, a season of massive, nonviolent, moral, direct action.
There will be a movement that will break through the con and cut through the lies and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
Shalom, I'm Rabbi Hannah Goldstein.
Greeting of peace, Assalamu alaikum. I am Imam Ali Siddiqui.
The prophet Isaiah proclaimed, "Doom to you who legislate evil, who make laws that make victims, laws that make misery for the poor, that rob my destitute people of dignity, exploiting defenseless widows, taking advantage of homeless children.
It is true, millions of people are homeless, lack adequate food and housing, and do not have quality education. That in many communities it is more likely that teenagers will end up in prison than graduate from high school, and that 3/4 of the people living below the poverty lines are women and children.
Somebody
is hurting our children. And it is time for this country to make a huge down payment on ending preventable, costly, and immoral child poverty in our healthy nation. A nation that does not stand for its children, does not stand for anything, and will not stand tall in the 21st century world for before God. Somebody hurting our children, and it is gone on for too long.
Today we stand as truth tellers, witnessing the pain and suffering of women caused by the injustices within our communities. The truth is that women held in local jails are the fastest growing segment of incarcerated people in the United States, and the majority of them are Black or Latino. The truth is that women are more likely to live in poverty. The truth is that economic gender equality is getting worse in the United States. The truth is that women earn 79 cents to a man's dollar. The truth is that 10 million women a year are victims of domestic violence. Someone's hurting women has gone for too long. Today we stand as truth tellers, witnessing the injuries suffered by those in our communities who live with disabilities. We stand in solidarity with over 40 million Americans living with disability. We fight for justice for elders who are significantly more likely the disability. We call out for injustice that disabled Americans earn less than those without a disability. We call out the injustice that in many of our communities, disabled Americans do not have access to the services they need. Somebody is hurting those who live with a disability, and it's gone on far too long. We know that we are a stronger nation and that our communities are better places to live when we care for the most vulnerable, children, women, and people living with disabilities. As moral people, we have a duty to stand for justice for our children, for women, and for people with disabilities. In the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, it's time for America to get right. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
So we're going to have some testifiers. Helen Avalos, that's right? Just one? Yeah. Just you? Just me. All right, Ms. Pope. Yeah. All right, well then this is how we're going to do this. I need somebody from the states that have come, or people who came from outside of D.C. as the contingency of 2 or 1 from your state. Stand up. Look, all over. All right. We want to have, so that the nation can see this, because the nation is watching this, one person who can stand for 2 or 3 minutes. I hear you. I'm getting ready to fix that too, because I understand that. Remember, I got a cane, so I understand that. I'm hardly standing right now, so I got you. All right, we need the persons that come from those states, one person from each state that can stand for a few minutes to come along the front, if you would. One person from each state. And when you come, holler the state you're from. Say the state you're from. All right. All right. And if there's someone that can't, my sister love. There we go. New York, what'd you say? Connecticut, Mexico, Iowa, what? Tennessee. Where else? Georgia. Pennsylvania, Nebraska. All right, there we go. Indiana, Massachusetts, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Arkansas, who? Illinois, Louisiana, Virginia, Iowa, New Jersey, we got Texas, we got Florida. Huh? Maryland, Maine, we got Arkansas. All right, give them a hand, everybody.
We good? Okay. My name is Dana Pope, and poverty is relative. When I was a kid, I didn't know how much money my parents or anyone else's parents made.
Y'all stay there with her. Stay up there.
What? Sorry. All I knew was that my family seemed to have less stuff than other kids that other kids took for granted. I was made fun of by the other kids at church for only having one pair of church shoes that I wore every Sunday. I felt like I had to hide the fact, as best I could, that my clothes mostly came from thrift stores and yard sales. I saw how other kids who weren't as able to hide it or who came to school with a stain on their clothes were mercilessly teased and bullied. We never went hungry, but we often ate things like hot dogs, bologna sandwiches, and ramen noodles. Besides being cheap, my younger sister and I were able to prepare them for ourselves when our parents were working and we were alone. As an adult, my world has vastly expanded, and the impact of poverty on my life has become both more obvious and painful. I live with my husband in my in-laws' basement because we cannot afford to pay rent. We both make well below the poverty line. Many things that middle-class people take for granted are out of reach for us. We have tens of thousands of dollars in student loans and can't afford to pay enough to cover the interest each month. We don't have enough savings or income to cover most unexpected expenses. People at our congregation ask us where we're going on vacation in the summer, but that's not really something we can afford. We keep putting off having a baby because we don't have stable income, but considering I'm 38, our window is going to close soon. People in situations like mine, and worse, are constantly told by society that we aren't good enough, that there's something wrong with us. We aren't trying hard enough, and that we deserve what little we have and no more. All of this is false. The reality is that poverty is created by decisions that our society makes. Everyone deserves to have a place to live. No one should ever go hungry because there is enough food in the world to feed everyone. No one should ever go without medicine or other health care because they can't afford it. These are things that every member of my family has gone through. My brother has suffered the worst physically. He's been unable to work for years and was repeatedly denied disability and the Medicare that comes along with it until recently. Because he couldn't get regular health care, he didn't have treatment for complications with diabetes until they had to amputate his lower leg to save his life. Now his kidneys are beginning to fail and his housing is insecure, and he's been homeless. If he doesn't have stable housing and show that he can pay for certain transplant expenses, he won't be on the transplant list. He's been on the Section 8 housing waiting list for years, but now he's in a wheelchair because he isn't strong enough to use a prosthetic, and the list is long. So he might end up dying if we can't raise enough money to keep him in his apartment. This whole situation is terrible. I am here as the person to talk about the evils of poverty, but I don't actually believe in evil. Most of what people call evil is what happens when we humans get disconnected and stop seeing each other's full humanity. The same is true of poverty. We are taught that poverty is the fault of the individual, and we are encouraged to stigmatize and ostracize poor people. The reality is that poverty is largely a result of factors that we as individuals have little control over. Was I born to parents who have inherited wealth? Do I live in an area of the country that has lost jobs due to automation? As a society, we have policies and institutions that create and reinforce poverty. But what we know here in the Poor People's Campaign is that if people made it, then we can change it. We can push for the equitable distribution of resources so that these evils are eradicated once and for all. Thank you.
Give it up for our sister. Forward together. All right. You may be seated. How many of you are ready for tomorrow? As the musicians make their way back to the front of the church, everybody here who is facing some kind of disability, either wave your hands or stand. All right. Everybody here that knows somebody disabled, and you're going to stand for them. All right. Now I want everybody to give, after they sing, the next voice you're going to hear is our leader, the prophetess, our sister, our friend, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who has what we call street credibility. Is that right? She's got street credibility. Would y'all give it up as she comes to lift not so much her voice, but a voice on behalf of the poor and the broken. Give it up for her as she comes.
In the spirit of true fusion movement, we're going to do a medley of songs. All across the country, songwriters have come together and put their creativity on the arc. And so these three pieces are put together, one from a sister in Little Rock, Arkansas, Anika Whitfield, who said, "Freedom ain't free. If you want freedom for children, fight for public schools. If you want," she said, "if you want freedom for families, fight for 15 and a union, because freedom ain't free." And then Lou Aya from the Peace Poets wrote, "We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation because we know why we were made." And then in the spirit again of movement, "Oh, freedom over me." Freedom ain't free. Oh, freedom ain't
fight for public schools. Freedom ain't free. Freedom ain't free. Oh, freedom ain't free. If you want freedom for families, fight for 15 and a union. Freedom ain't free. Justice ain't free. Oh, justice ain't free. If you want justice for children, fight for public schools. Justice ain't free. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation, 'cause we know why we were made. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation, 'cause we know why we were made. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation, 'cause we know why we were made. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Freedom ain't free. Oh, freedom ain't free. If you want freedom for children, fight for public schools. Freedom ain't free. Freedom ain't free. Oh, freedom ain't free. If you want freedom for families, fight for 15 and a union. Freedom ain't free. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation, 'cause we know why we were made. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation, 'cause we know why we were made. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We will live for liberation, 'cause we know why we were made. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried. Before I be a slave, I will be buried in my grave. Before I be a slave in my grave, and before
I'll be buried in my grave. I'll go home. I'll go home. I'll go home with my Lord.
Are we afraid? Are we afraid? Before anyone is a slave, all of us are committed to giving our lives for everyone's freedom. So tell me again, are we afraid? Are we afraid? Are we afraid? Because we're the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. That's right. It is great to be here this evening. It is powerful to be in our nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. As some of us were reminded this evening by Reverend Graylin Hagler, who I want to recognize. Reverend Hagler. There he is one of our last colonies. And so it is important that we're here in Washington, D.C. Thank you to all of the people in Washington, D.C., all of the poor people of Washington, D.C., who are standing up and fighting for justice, for D.C., for this nation, and for this world. I want to let folks know that people all over the country are watching the live stream. There are watch parties in more than 39 states that have been organizing. There are hundreds and thousands of people who, just like us, are readying ourselves to take action together tomorrow. Are we afraid? Are we afraid? Are we going to make our voices heard? Yes, because we are living in a cruel and unjust society. When there are 140 million poor people in the country, when there are 38 million poor children, 20 million poor elders, 11 million people living under the threat of deportation and detention, 13 million people not able to afford water for themselves and their kids. When 75% of poor people in this country are women and children. When 60% of African Americans are poor, when 65% of Latinx folks are poor, when 40% of Asians are poor, when there are 67 million poor white people, we must say, this is not right. This is not moral. Our people are not free. We must proclaim, somebody is hurting our people, and it has gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Let's say it again. Somebody is hurting our people, and it has gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. This evening, I want to tell you about some of the leaders who are building the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I want to introduce you all to a mother like Callie Greer, who has come from Selma, Alabama, who had to bury her daughter, Venus, because she didn't have health care. And Alabama refused to expand Medicaid. There are mothers like Callie. There are mothers like Leslie Boyd, who was with us in Goldsboro, North Carolina 2 days ago, whose son died because although he was working and a full-time student and volunteering in the community, he couldn't get health insurance because of a pre-existing condition, and he died, all from preventable causes. Or Danelle Morrow, whose mom died because of inadequate health care in a nursing home in Pennsylvania. I don't think I need to remind you all that today is Mother's Day. It's a holiday where we're supposed to appreciate mothers. It's a holiday that was established by women with a rich history in activism and resistance. Mothers who called for an end to war, an end to violence and devastation in our communities and in our world. So standing in this nation's capital, I have a question for our country. Is denying health care to mothers and their children a way to show our country's love for mothers, for families of all types, for any of God's children? In Michigan, in Detroit, there are 100,000 households that don't have running water. Mothers and families are losing their homes. They're losing their children because of living without water. And this is at the same time as the Nestle Corporation can bottle that very same water that families in Detroit can't afford to pay their high water bills for. Water bills that get as high as thousands of dollars a month. But Nestle, for just a few dollars a year, can bottle and sell that water and make billions in profit. In Detroit, some teachers have told me that they have to say to their elementary school students, kids the same age as my daughter Sophia and son Luke, to not tell them if there's no running water in their house,
Because if a teacher hears that the family is living without water, they have to tell the authorities, and the kids will be taken away from their families. Well, we have a message for the authorities, for these multinational companies, for our politicians here in DC and in states across the country. Take away our poverty, not our children. Take away our high water bills, not our children. Take away our homelessness, not our children. Take away these unjust immigration policies, not our children. Take away racism, not our children. Take away homophobia, not our children. Take away this injustice. Keep families together. Make communities strong. Everyone has the right to live. Everyone has the right to live. Everyone has the right to live. Water is life. Our children are life. This country was founded on life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We must live up to those ideals. It is immoral for people to profit from moms having their kids taken away. It is immoral in a world of beauty and abundance that God's children don't have access to water, that God's children don't have access to housing or health care or a good education or the right to vote in so many communities across this country, or sanitation services, or the freedom to live without fear and violence. It is immoral that half of our nation's children are poor. Half. And we have the resources to feed, to clothe, to house, to educate, to care for everyone, not just in this city, not just in this country, in the entire world. So I want to tell you about the power of some of these poor moms, of poor people persistently fighting and engaging in nonviolent moral fusion direct action. I want to tell you about the power of moral leaders and clergy and activists challenging this injustice, this immorality. I could tell you about the power of mothers like Marion Kramer in Detroit, Michigan, who put her body in front of trucks being sent out to cut thousands of Detroiters from running water and got arrested insisting that nobody should be denied water, who teamed up with lawyers and researchers and activists and pastors and proposed a water affordability plan and got it passed, and who is taking action with us in Lansing, Michigan for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Everyone here in DC, you have to meet Callie Greer, who will be taking action with us at the US Capitol tomorrow, who is committed that Venus, yes, say her name, Venus, Venus. Venus did not die in vain. Because Callie will fight and organize and mobilize until every single person in this country and world has the health care they need, not just to survive, but to thrive. And I know watching the live stream now is Leslie Boyd, who's helping to lead the direct action taking place in Raleigh, North Carolina tomorrow. And in Pennsylvania, Danelle Morrow and leaders from Put People First Pennsylvania will be in Harrisburg tomorrow. A year after Danelle's mother died, leaders across Pennsylvania organized a vigil to hold the authorities accountable for her mom's death, including Black Muslim women leaders from Philadelphia coming to Johnstown to be in solidarity with white Christian women and other diverse families. A fusion movement is growing across this country. And there are other stories of these persistent women. There are stories about some of the freedom fighters who have come before. Freedom fighters like Fannie Lou Hamer and Mother Jones and Julia Ward Howe and Dorothy Day and Johnny Tillman and Annie Smart and Dottie Stevens and Ella Baker. And there's also this powerful story from the Bible. In Luke 18, perhaps some of you have heard of it. It's often called the parable of the unjust judge and the persistent widow. It's a story about the power of poor people as well. The story goes that there was a poor woman who keeps petitioning a powerful politician for justice for her and her community. The story tells us that the powerful politician has no compassion for people. He also doesn't even fear God. Perhaps he thinks he's God. Perhaps he thinks I and I alone have the power to do anything and everything. But this poor woman, this woman and her children who have been rejected by society, who also are living in a cruelly unjust society, who are poor, who need justice, who need water, who need housing, who need health care, who need food and education. This persistent poor woman won't be silent. She prays with her feet. She protests for justice. She keeps coming back over and over and over again. She comes back with signs. She comes back with songs. She comes back with stories about her injustice and those around her. Perhaps she comes back with her children and her whole community. Maybe she starts organizing other communities, other states, and she wins justice. Even though the political authority doesn't love justice, even though that political authority doesn't respect God, is content with hurting people, passes policies that oppress widows and orphans, she wins justice. So I tell you all tonight, we are this persistent widow. We demand justice. We demand health care. We demand housing. We demand water. We demand voting rights. We demand just immigration. We demand equitable education, and we will keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and we will win. I believe we will win. I believe we will win. I believe we will win. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
Come on, let's practice marching. Come on. Pick them up. Oh, Jericho. Pick those feet up. Left, right. Whoa. Then Jericho. Hallelujah. Amen. Let's thank God for the way in which the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris helps us hear the voice and the pain of all the people. So it's time And it's been time for a long time. And we have been chosen not because we're the best or the brightest, but because we're available. And God can make us better than we can ever imagine. So all over the nation, people coming together, and I'm so glad that Liz allowed herself, as the Spirit led, to cry, because tomorrow is not a festival. Let me say that all over the nation. We are not trying to make people see how happy we are. We are not trying to make people say, they sure did look good. They wore the right things. The signs were so pretty. We are trying to get people to see the pain of this nation so that change will come. The Bible declares that there must go a sound out, Reverend Hagler, from Ramah. If you want the nation to change, you got to make the nation cry. You got to cause something to happen that will affect the nation greater than money affects it. You do know, as I sit and see Gene out there today, that we are tonight, 3 days after the agreement was made in Birmingham in 1963. This would have been the third day the agreement was made to desegregate Birmingham, a city they said couldn't be desegregated. A city where the first march barely had 50 people in it. So we don't judge our work by numbers like others. But by the end of the campaign, children were in the street. And the entire world was watching the pictures. And things shifted. This was a few months before the March on Washington. Actually, 3 months. On May 10th, 1963. And then 4 girls were blown up in September, not because the movement hadn't won, but because the movement had. And even then, Dr. King said that somehow those girls' blood spoke a language from the grave that began to bring many people who were not even concerned into the movement. Thank you, Liz, for reminding us that tomorrow, if you're here representing, if you're here impacted, it's the time to show your tears. When you talk to the cameras, show them. How many of you all can cry and think at the same time? I know that some sisters can do that. Come on, sisters, and help me. And so, my beloved sister always has a prophetic word in times like these. To the DC organizing team, all of you who have worked so hard to allow us to be here from around the nation on this Mother's Day, we are here to birth and launch a movement with a 21st century angle, edge, agenda that is tied to the moral analysis, the moral articulation and moral activism and moral aspirations of love and hope and justice. And every Sunday for 6 weeks, we will have these mass meetings here and via social media to lay out the framework, because you should never join a movement that can't tell you what they're really about. And so this week, every song, every word, every sign is supposed to be focused on children in poverty, women in poverty, and the disabled. Say that with me. Say children in poverty, women in poverty, and the disabled. And when we say children, we mean gay or straight, young or old, black or white or brown or red or indigenous. When we say women, we mean gay or straight, transgender, whoever they are. We mean everybody. And you should be tweeting everywhere you can and telling everybody you know in D.C. to show up, and if not back home to show up. And even if they're not going to do the direct action, they ought to show up just to be a witness. Turn to somebody and say, tell it. Now, you all know, I'm going to say, I joke sometime in the middle of the movement. You all know if Liz was up here carrying on and I came right up here and kissed her square on the lips, y'all would tell that everywhere. It'd be all over the news, wouldn't it? Lord have mercy. Reverend Barbara went up there and her husband was right in there and his wife was sitting in there, and Lord have mercy. We tell bad news. It's time to tell some good news. There's a movement afoot. There's a movement afoot. And we join the traditions of those who down through the history in this nation, who kept on believing in this moral aspiration. We join the indigenous First Nation spiritual leaders. Somebody asked me out there, well, where are you all getting your impetus from? It's a lot of places. There's never been just one movement or one part of a movement or one side of a movement. We joined the indigenous First Nation spiritual leaders. We joined the abolitionists. We joined the Reconstruction movement. We joined the legacy of the anti-lynching movement. We joined the women's suffrage movement. We joined the social gospel movement. We joined the bonus marchers of the 1930s. We joined the labor union movement. We joined the Appalachian, is that right? Appalachian, did I say it right? I got to get it right. We joined the Appalachian populist movement, mountain populism, that is very similar to civil rights activism. We joined the civil rights movement. We joined the Latino farm workers movement. We joined the liberation theologians movement. We joined the lessons from the anti-war peace movements. And we joined the original architects of the 1968 Poor People's Campaign. We joined this grand moral tradition, learning and informed by each of these traditions to birth a Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival at this moment, in this time. At this time, 40 states and here in the District of Columbia have joined together to make this happen. And I want to tell you that before the laws are changed ultimately, we've already won, because some people said that we black and white and brown and yellow and red and gay and straight couldn't even organize. Well, in 40 states, there's a remnant. In 40 states, there are a group of people who believe. And the first victory is our faith to believe. And we are birthing tomorrow a movement to begin, say to begin, a multi-year campaign. See, I want that to be clear. It's not one day, 140 days. The 40 days is a birthing. This is a multi-year campaign and movement, and it's being birthed not to engage in the futility of exercising our frustrations for just a moment. No, this is a movement and not a moment. Our work is informed by hard empirical and anecdotal facts and evidence, and the startling revelations in the Souls of Poor Folks audit that audited America since 1968, the research done by the Institute for Poverty Policy Studies with some assistance from the Urban Institute, a host of scholars, economists, historians, and most importantly, impacted people who live the data. Because the last thing you want to be in a movement is loud and wrong. The data is clear that far too many, the data is clear, and it reveals that far too many people attempt to deceive us about the state of our national reality. The data is clear that the cost of inequality
is too high for America to continue down this road. The data is clear, the stories are penetrating, and it lets us know that there are many who refuse to acknowledge the sinful, immoral realities of policy-caused racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy. And not only do they refuse to acknowledge it and lie about it, they even go so far as to bring in their own complement of false prophets and religious chaplains to grant prayers and blessings while their policies are preying, P-R-E-Y-I-N-G, and creating burdens on the poor and the low wealth and the marginalized people of our nation. It is not the 39 million people that, according to the government standard for poverty, that are living with poverty and low wealth. It is 140 million people of every color, creed, kind, demographic, and geography, and sexual orientation. And so we know that this is not and cannot be the America we settle for. In fact, after organizing among the people and the impacted and the conscientious clergy and advocates and academics, we are now seeing this grand move of people and citizens who are declaring we need this fusion coalition. Not just a coalition, because see, people can get in coalition for their issue. And then when their issue is fixed, they exit the coalition. People can use coalitions. But a fusion coalition says that one issue can't be won without the other. That like the sun is created by fusion. When atoms come together, they're bright by themselves, but they are really bright when they fuse together. And in America, we might as well wake up and understand you cannot address systemic racism without addressing systemic poverty. You cannot address systemic poverty without addressing systemic racism. You can't address systemic racism and systemic poverty without addressing ecological devastation. You can't address systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation without addressing the war economy and militarism, and you can't address systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation and the war economy and militarism without addressing the false moral narrative or immoral narrative of religious nationalism that allows these things to exist without a moral challenge. And so we are declaring somebody's hurting the people, and we won't be silent anymore. We choose not to believe the hype, nor do we choose to believe that when the unemployment rate comes down to 5%, and then somebody's in presidency and they claim they bring it down another 1.5%, that everything is fine. When in fact most of the jobs that are being created are low-wage jobs. All the wealth is going to the top 1%, and 4% of millions of people is still far too many to be left outside. We choose like Trevor Noah to say we must stop merely being offended by extremism, and we must see the challenge and the effect that it's having. Too many folk are offended by what they see, but they're not getting involved in an offensive against what they see. We agree with Brother Christoph yesterday in the New York Times, who said we must challenge the media to stop their addiction to Trump and instead focus, instead focus on the lewd, nasty, heartless ways policies are being put in place that are and will destroy people's lives all across this country. Pastor, I'm a pastor. I deal
with the pastoral and the prophetic. I want to stand flat-footed in this pulpit and say, it's not the stormy Daniel saga, but the economic storms and the devastating policies that are tearing apart the lives and souls of poor people. And we have to turn the attention of the nation towards the real pornography. In the Bible, in the prophets, whenever the nation turned toward injustice, turned toward hurting the poor, turned toward hurting the children, the Bible says that nation has gone following and after, says that nation has gone following after whoredom. That nation has gone whoring after other gods. We need the media and progressive politicians not to get so involved in what Stormy did, but if you want some real pornography, let's undo the illicit relationship between the Supreme Court and big business that produced the bastard child of Citizens United. So tonight, I come here with some women on my mind. As we prepare tomorrow to focus on children, women, and the disabled, in the first 6 weeks, the first 40 days, my mind is on my mother, 85 years strong, who still works at the school she desegregated in 1970. And I hear my mama tonight saying what she said at a rally in front of an unjust hog plant in North Carolina that UFCW was trying to unionize. She said simply, the way they are treating these people is just wrong. God knows it's wrong, and somebody ought to do something. I come here tonight with my mind on Amy, who I met in West Virginia. A mother who lives as a working poor with her children in the hills of West Virginia, where my maternal grandfather comes from, in a state that refuses living wages and health care, and where a cynical governor gave teachers a raise by cutting money for Medicaid and food stamps. I come here tonight thinking about the mother I met in Alabama, whose name is Pamela, who, in my notes I was trying to take today, I was trying to be careful with my language, but the computer kept saying who was raped. I kept trying to say who was ripped off. And the computer kept correcting me. She was literally raped by predatory lenders, forced to pay over $120,000 for a single-wide trailer at double-digit interest. She herself is disabled. Her 11-year-old son has to wear a CPAP machine from the mold now because she can't afford any other housing. And she has raw sewage in her backyard because politicians refuse to spend the money to ensure that black and white poor people in Alabama have access to public sewage system. I'm here tonight, Liz, thinking about the mother who confronted the Border Patrol in El Paso. And she fought for years, fighting with them. How could she see her husband and children that were wrongfully kicked out of this country for a simple administrative mistake? And finally, when we were down there, she had just won with the Border Patrol the right to have 3 minutes with her husband and her children, but she had to walk into the middle of the Rio Grande River and meet them there. We walked in that river with her. I knew about black people not being free until they got to the other side of the Ohio River during slavery. But in the 21st century, we still have these eerie realities. I carry with me tonight the young sister that I met for the first time in Washington State. She's here tonight. Where is she? She dared, in a very revealing moment, we didn't know she was going to say it, to describe that she was a part of white millennial homeless people, that she described as the white trash that America has thrown out but forgot to burn. I'm here tonight after talking with Graylin about Barry Farms in D.C. and how we've been talking about how he and I plan to go live for a few days right here in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital. I'm here thinking about the Apache women who didn't really trust me when I first came on the Apache reservation, even though I'm Tuscaroran. They watched all day, they looked at me all day, they never said much. Every now and then I'd hear the medicine man say, I didn't know what he was saying. But at the end of the day, they handed me a feather, they handed me a necklace, and said, we believe in this movement. But I think about them because right now multinational countries are drilling on federal lands. And in Arizona, I pray that before our brother Senator John McCain leaves, he will strike down the rule that's going to cause, that's allowing this company to drill and poison the aquifers and to poison the atmosphere where women and children, indigenous, the First Nation, these are stories that represent millions of others. These are the faces and the millions of others. These are the facts and the millions of others that we cannot allow America to merely ignore, and that's why we're launching this movement. The first goal is to put the faces with the facts and to change the narrative. You may not win everything at first. Pharaoh becomes arrogant before Pharaoh is brought down. But you must put a face. We can't be silent. They can't be silent. Religion and faith in our democracy cannot be silent, for these realities are not the results of bad individual choices or the immorality of poor people. These and millions more are the result of conscious acts and direct policy decisions rooted in greed, sin, and immoral efforts. Policies that are rooted in the philosophy of the economics of survival of the fittest. Policies tied to the lie of trickle-down economics. Policies tied to the false philosophy that individual charity can solve these problems. Policies that are tied to the racialization of poverty to make people think that poverty is just a black issue or a brown issue or a red issue, when poverty and the evils of poverty is an American issue that affects every color and every kind and every creed. These realities are related to policies tied to the misguided legal and political decisions that treat corporations like people and people like things. You should never go and prepare to do direct action without knowing exactly why. That's why we're teaching tonight. In fact, in a real sense, as harsh as some may say it sounds, when you've seen what Liz and I have seen and cried like Liz and I have cried and had to walk away from communities that we wish we had some magic to immediately change it, you cannot back up from saying that poor people are facing violence. I'm reminded of Mother Coretta Scott King when she said somebody wanted to just focus on her husband's assassination as violence. And Mother King said, oh, I won't be limited to talking about violence just when it occurs to a member of my family. Violence is denying living wages. Violence is denying public education, she said. Violence is taking away health care. Violence is ignoring and undermining people's culture. Violence is destroying equal rights. And then she said there's one more form of violence, and that is an apathetic attitude that refuses to address the other forms of violence. We cannot get caught up in simply thinking these are partisan issues. We are facing and have faced for some time policy violence and the false and distorted morality and religiosity that seeks to cover up violence.
And we must declare that policy violence and a distorted moral religiosity that seeks to cover up violence is denounced by the moral foundations of our Constitution and denounced by the deep and rich religious values of Scripture. When mothers are torn away, President Owens, from families, and families are broken apart, and Latino and Haitian and other young people are battered by unjust immigration policies that take the work of immigrants, take the tax profits of immigrants, but disregard them as undocumented immigrants because extremist politicians rooted in a racist ideology do not want them to have citizenship because they do not want them to vote. That's violence. When politicians who have health care paid for by the people, the best health care paid for by the people, simply because they got elected, refuse to pass single health care plan for all the people, and when they allow 37 million people to go without health care, knowing that 5,000 or more for every 1 million that do not have health care die, that's violence. When they allow companies to poison the water on First Nation reservations, that's violence. When they right now are making plans to cut the children's health program and food stamps in order to close the gap in an unnecessary tax cut deal, that, my friends, is violence. It's just as violence as a drive-by on the street. It's nothing but gangsterized politics that has to be challenged at every turn. And my friends, when you know that the voting rights in this country were secured in this country only by blood and death, and knowing that, and you know that voting is the only way to offset the gross amount of money being put into our political system with the intent of making it what John Nichols calls a dollarocracy and not a democracy. And when Congress can refuse to fix that Voting Rights Act for 1,784 days today, and we call Strom Thurmond a racist who only blocked the Civil Rights Act of '57 for 1 day. And today, as we sit within the sight of the Senate and the House, the leadership of Ryan and McConnell and used to be Boehner has held up fixing the Voting Rights Act for 1,784 days, 2,568,960 minutes, 42,816 hours a day. They have refused, and that refusal allows extremists to cheat and win political office, because I don't know what Russia did, because I got some suspicion, but I know what racist voter suppression has done all over this country. I know what it's done in Illinois and Wisconsin and Alabama and Louisiana and South Carolina and Georgia and North Carolina and Florida and Tennessee and Maryland. I know what it's done. And when that voter suppression wrapped up with a Southern strategy that pits black and white and brown people against each other, and people use the trickery of voter suppression to get elected, and then once they get elected, those primarily, well, all white for the most part, politicians then vote on policies that undermine health care and resist living wages that hurt not only black people but mostly white people. I'm telling you that
that this is gangsterization of our politics. This is political violence, and it is the reason why we must have a nonviolent, moral fusion, direct confrontation with this kind of violence. We have to confront it. We must confront the arrogance and seek to redeem the heart and the soul of the nation. We must do what others have done before us. The future may not be known, but the past gives us hope. My God, if they could stand up against slavery. My God, if they could stand up against lynching. My God, if they could stand up against those who didn't want women to vote. My God, if the bonus marchers could march in the 1930s, surely with Twitter and email and cars and cell phone, we can march and stand today. Turn to your neighbor and say, ain't nobody scared. My brothers and my sisters, we must see the great cloud of witnesses as our example. And we must resist silence and resist submission and resist surrender. Moral resistance has always produced moral results. Moral resistance has never ultimately lost. Oh, it's been crucified. It's been pierced. But moral movements have always had a resurrection, have always gotten up. Now, some of us, Pastor, I don't know how situated your pastorate here is, the church, but I don't know if they vote around here at National City, but I want everybody to know right up front, they're going to call you this name. Terry, they're going to call you a name. Imam, they're going to call you a name. It's an aura name. It's a rough name. They're going to call you radical. Some of them may want to call you rat, but they're not going to say that because that doesn't play well. But they're going to call you radical. This movement with their radical ideas. Liz, they're going to call you radical. Well, radical means to desire fundamental change. So, if wanting to see every child have health care and every child be able to eat, and every person, every woman, every child, every disabled person be respected, and if wanting to have the full resources for a life outside of the clutches of poverty, if speaking truth to power is radical, if wanting to establish justice is radical, if wanting to ensure domestic tranquility is radical, if wanting to promote the general welfare is radical, if wanting to provide for the common defense is radical, if wanting to ensure equal protection under the law regardless of your race, your creed, your color, or your sexual orientation is radical, if following what Jesus said about caring for the least of these, the broken and the undocumented and the sick is radical, then sign me up as Exhibit A. I'll go to court any day, anytime, anywhere to be charged with being a radical for love and justice and righteousness. And so we must have a movement that says challenging systemic racism and all of these ills is not even about left versus right. Both parties have to be challenged, one for what it does and one for what it doesn't do. Not about left versus right, it's about right versus wrong. We must confront this nation and dare Erica to have that kind of strength that Fannie Lou Hamer had. When wrong abounds, she dared to look America in the face and say, I question America. When poverty abounded, she said, I question America. Peter Marshall, whose pulpit I had the privilege of standing in last week at the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church, he once said in the 40s to America, praying in the Senate, and they didn't fire him either. He said, we may think of freedom not as a right to do as we please, but as the opportunity to do what is right. Rabbi Heschel, in July of 1963, former pastor of the Hebrew congregation here in DC, wrote John Kennedy a note in handwriting directly and said simply this, Mr. President, this nation forfeits the right to worship God until we do right by the race question. And so we are exercising our God-given freedom with impacted people to do what is right. The prophet Isaiah 2,600 years ago, Liz, gave us a strategy. Hear me around the nation. In the face of meanness and unjust politicians being advised by their false prophet contingency, Isaiah in Isaiah 10 said, somebody in every age better remind those who think they have power, woe unto you who pass evil legislation that robs the rights of the poor and makes women and children their prey. I didn't make that up. That was penned on papyrus 2,600 years ago, and it's still true. In other words, woe, stop it. Isaiah says that in every age there must be some people who aren't afraid of the king or the Congress, that aren't afraid of the prince or the president, who dare to say, whoa, stop it. Even if they don't immediately stop it, our job is to first say, stop it. Whenever you pass legislation that take the rights of the poor, listen to that, the human rights of the poor, and make women and children prey, then your nation can't survive like that. You better stop it, America. Because if you don't treat the poor right, you'll never be able to fix this economy. There will always be instability. You cannot build a pyramid where all of the bottom is broken and cracked and bleeding and think that pyramid is going to exist forever. You better stop it. Because if you mistreat the poor, the children, and the women, you mistreat God. And you undermine the future of the nation itself. And one day, even this country is going to have to face God and be judged. Stop it. And our job in every generation is to make sure the first thing is they can't say they didn't know. I don't know when everything is going to be changed. But Liz, I'm not willing to die and not have been a part of people who love this nation enough, who love the people of this nation enough to tell it when it was wrong and say, stop it. But then, how do you say that? Isaiah then closes in Isaiah 58. He says, and Rabbi, help me, he says somebody has to cater, and that's the word for cry. Cater vagravan. That's the word kera, K-E-R-A-V-E-G-A-R-O-V-N. Isaiah 58 says, I need somebody that will cry loud like a trumpet.
I need a remnant. I need a group of people that will go right in the Capitol, not around the Capitol. I need some people that will go right there, and they will cry. And that word V-E-G-A-R-O-V-N, it literally means, help me, Rabbi, if I'm wrong, help me. It literally means a full-throated cry. It means like a trumpet blast. It doesn't mean a toot. It means a full-throated, loud, sustained, maybe a 6 weeks cry. I don't know, but Isaiah knew way back then that one tweet is not enough. We have to cry loud. We can't shut up. We won't shut up. We have to build a stage for poor people to demand attention. We can't send one email. We can't write one editorial. And we can't just have one march. We have to put our bodies on the line and put our mouths to work. And we have to cry loud until hearts are changed. Cry loud until consciousness are shifted. Cry loud until foundations are shaken. Cry loud until love is awakened. We have to cry loud until the poor are lifted and the children are embraced. Cry loud until women are respected and the disabled are assisted. Cry loud until the broken are repaired, until the lion lays down with the lamb, until every worker is paid what they deserve. Cry loud until valleys disappear. Cry loud until regardless of race and color and creed and sexual orientation, we are all cared for. Cry loud until hate is overcome by love and greed is overcome by love and meanness is overcome by mercy. Cry loud. It's time to cry loud with every bit of love and every bit of truth and every bit of righteousness that's deep down in your belly. Rear back your head. Cry loud. Somebody's hurting our people. Somebody's hurting our people. Somebody's hurting the women, and we won't be silent. And I want the clergy and one impacted person to come with each clergy. Clergy, grab one impacted person. And we need 5 up here to come stand with clergy. We're not going to let them separate us. And the other clergy that are here, come up. Ask somebody to come walk with you. Hallelujah. There's an army that's rising. But you know somebody's too. Hallelujah. There's this army rising and you all are the army.
There's a clergy and an impacted person right across the front. Somebody impacted by race and back. A woman, children, disabled. It's time to put a face. Turn and face the audience when the clergy, when you get your person. Those of you on the stage, you can go grab somebody. You can walk out in the audience and get you somebody. And bring them right back in the pulpit. People are going to know they're not going to separate us. Is there any clergy in the back that wants to come on, clergy, grab somebody, come on up here. You don't have to know them, just know they're here, know they're special. Any faith tradition, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, if you're not a clergy or not a person of faith, but you believe in the moral arc of the universe and you're an advocate, grab somebody in your own tradition. We just know at least one person. There's an army. Now tonight, center yourself. The last step to civil disobedience is purging. It is saying, I'm not doing this for any vainglory. I'm not doing this for any party or any reason like that. I'm doing this with the poor, not for, not paternalistically. And I believe in all of the issues. And I'm willing to do the discipline tomorrow of focusing on women and children and the disabled. And I'm trusting that if I do that, my issue will be dealt with. Next week, we'll have another next week. However you center yourself, do not let anybody move you to violence tomorrow. We're better than that. We're stronger than that. Somebody may want to try to change the narrative. In Alaska, they had somebody spray on them grizzly bear mace while they were preparing. But you know, the Alaskans said it's too big. We've got to stay together. We're not chained by that. We are the ones that have been called, and we have more in this room that started in Birmingham. So tomorrow we go to training at 10, and then at 2 o'clock we start the rally. 45 minutes. Everybody can't speak. Those who are speaking for all of us. And then our greatest speech is going to, when we from over 37 states and the District of Columbia and others hook arms together, carry those signs with our issues, say those chants with our demands, and we engage in an act of direct action. And this nation sees something happen simultaneously it has never seen. It has never seen. The most expansive act of nonviolent moral civil disobedience simultaneously. Moral direct action, fusion direct action simultaneously that the nation has ever seen to spark a movement. The only way we lose is we be silent. That nothing else matters. The first thing, before you can have moral implementation, you have to have a moral imagination. And you can't have a moral imagination until the narrative changes. And you can't change the narrative until the narrators change. And that's why with the poor, we have to change this narrative. You all ready for these 40 days? Hold your hands up. You ready? Army rising. Oh. If you want to see something, look behind you. See what I see. There's an army rising up. Oh, break every chain. Now, I was taught in my tradition that you don't give a benediction at the end of the service like this because you're going out. And this ain't the end. We don't want anybody to think this is the end. So I'm going to let Liz say last whatever she wants to say. Amen. Get some rest tonight. Get some water tonight. Tweet somebody tonight. Practice what you're going to say if the camera's in you. We want you to talk, but speak the issues, the truth, the facts. so that we can begin, and so that they can, no media, nobody can any longer say we can ignore what's happening with women and children and disabled. It's not what happens on Wall Street, it's what's happening on the back streets and the back roads and the broken places of America. We are the consciousness. Turn to your neighbor and say, you and I are the consciousness that the divine has placed in the earth for this moment. Since you're here, since you're alive, and since you don't plan to go anywhere anytime soon, you might as well cry loud.
There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up to break every chain, break every chain. Break every chain, break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up to break every chain, 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 break every chain. So 50 years ago, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, we live, the poor and dispossessed, live in a cruel and unjust society. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. And he continued and said, those who choose to join this nonviolent, intergenerational, multiracial army of the poor, those who choose to join this freedom church of the poor will come together, live nonviolent skills, and organize. There is a nonviolent army of poor people and clergy rising up across this country. And those who choose to take action together, we are becoming a new and unsettling force. And we will break every chain of violence, of injustice, of systemic racism, of poverty, of ecological devastation, and of a distorted, immoral narrative that blames us for our problems, that pits us against each other, and that claims that there is not enough when we have more than enough to go around. So keep fighting, keep organizing, and come in Washington, D.C., and be trained tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you're in another state, come at 11 a.m. and get trained and join this nonviolent army of the poor. Let's break every chain. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up to break every chain, 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 break every chain. Get hugs, be safe, and come back tomorrow.